Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Cat Show. And I am this week with the fabulous Scott Ehrlich, who is the Senior Vice President for Growth Networks and Content for the Sinclair Broadcast Group. And I had a chance to be on a panel recently with Scott, and the stuff that he has his hands on is kind of a mind blow, and sort of the best education of what's happening in television in terms of the distribution mechanism and all the different content models. And so I thought it would be great to talk to Scott about all the things that they're up to at Sinclair, because it's a great education, I think, for the current ecosystem. So welcome to the Tech Hat Show, Scott. Why don't you tell us first about your role?
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So I've been at the company for almost 4 years now. And I oversee a couple of different units. So my business unit is called National Networks and Platforms, and Sinclair is at its heart a local media company. So our biggest assets are our local television stations and the regional sports networks that we acquired about 2 years ago. And so we're known generally as a local media company, and I was kind of brought in to be the kind of national guy. So that means a couple of things. So the national networks part is we have 4 over-the-air broadcast networks. So yes, 25 years after I got into streaming, I got into over-the-air broadcasting with antennas and stuff. And we'll come back to sort of why that makes sense to me anyway. And then the other part of the job is the platforms part are our OTT platforms. So we have a service called NewsON, which has well over 200 local newscasts aggregated into one app. And so if you're a local news junkie or you're a news junkie in general, it's kind of a real buffet. And it's really, it really hits a stride. And, you know, something like a hurricane hits the Gulf, and you can go from a station in Shreveport to a station in Mobile to a station in Tallahassee, and you can kind of go around and see how different people are covering the story. And then, of course, if you're out of market, you can see the news from your market. And then Stirr's our owned and operated OTT platform. We launched in January of 18, I think it was. January of 19.
Does it really matter?
I feel like I've been living in a time warp for the last year and a half. Does anybody else feel that way?
Yeah, we had a year that sort of didn't happen.
No, it was January of 19. So it's not 2 years old. And Stirr's a platform that has about 130 fast channels, free ad-supported streaming television channels. And unique to that space, which is a space that includes people like Pluto and Samsung TV Plus and other brands in the space, we have a local curated channel for each of our markets. And so right now we have 85, I think, localized channels. That a combination of local content, syndicated content, and just a mix that we think is appealing to the local broadcast audience. But and then the last part of my job is has to do with innovation. And so I oversee a group that we refer to as the Content Lab. And about 2 years ago, we decided it would be really helpful for all the things that we were trying to do to have a group that was just dedicated to innovation. And so we put together a cross-functional team that's got somebody who comes from a sales background, somebody who comes from a audience development background, somebody who comes from a format-driven production background. Another producer is a bit of a mad scientist kind of producer, and some research support, and really kind of gave them a charter to go and break things, build things, find a different way to do things. And it's been a really great group to have put together, and really was eye-opening, you know, when COVID hit and we had to figure out things like remote production. That team was able to dive right in and work with different technologies and figure out a solution so that we wound up producing a newscast for, I think it was Gainesville, Florida, out of a laptop in West Palm Beach.
Oh, that's so cool. So like a skunk works. Well, I would love for you to
very much so.
let's take a step back now, because I know you have your fingers in all these places, and just sort of look at the landscape. Because most consumers right now have, and you and I were talking about this because it's awkward for me. I have a LG, and I have a Fire Stick in it, and it takes me a while to get to the Fire Stick on the remote because I'm competing with the LG's own solutions. And then there's all the OTT boxes, then there's the apps. So could you kind of break it down for us, like what are all these models? And a little bit maybe, if you have any insights about what you think's working or why not, because it is overly complex. And I think more than ever before, especially with like what's going on in the news today with all the re-aggregation now of AT&T and all that, but also just there's so many choices for consumers. So how do we think about this? So maybe talk to us a little bit about what are all these things, which I know, Sinclair, and you've just mentioned, has, but give us a sense of what this landscape is.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if I really knew, I'd bottle it and sell it. But
we could start with, just we have connected TVs, right? So what's happening?
If you look, the biggest issue I think we face as a content industry right now is discovery. Like discoverability of content is hard and getting harder, and the more content there is, the harder that problem gets. And that is a common problem no matter what platform you're on. But the way I think about it is you've got over the air, which is both where television started, and has sort of newly found its footing. I think the largest growing segment of the television audience is the over-the-air audience. The part of the audience is getting television over an antenna, and digital antennas they're relatively inexpensive. They start at like $7, $8, $9. And you get a lot of channels. Here in Los Angeles, I actually put an antenna on my roof. And when I asked my installer to do that, he was like, "What? Like an antenna? Like yes, an antenna." I get 205 channels.
Well, and is there a service you're subscribing to, or it just you buy the antenna and you just connect it to your TV?
Yeah, you just connect it to your TV. Just old school, like you said, the rabbit ears, right?
Yeah,
all the way back in the day.
Yeah.
This is really not that different. It's a modern version of that, but it's an over-the-air antenna. So these are free over-the-air signals that come over FCC licensed spectrum, and you get the full uncompressed signal. The rebroadcasting services, whether it's cable or satellite, they have to compress the signals to be able to take maximum use their platforms with maximum efficiency. Should have been easier to say. Over the air, though, you get the full uncompressed signal. And in areas where it works, it's beautiful. And you do see a lot of consumers taking this kind of hybrid approach, where they'll have an antenna, they'll have a streaming box of some kind, or a connected TV, and those are getting closer and closer in terms of the functionality that they offer. And maybe they'll have one TV that's still kind of old school, connected to an MVPD. For us as a company, it's a little like asking which of your children you prefer, right?
Right, because you have plays in all those spaces. But if I'm watching something over the air, are there commercials?
Yep.
And so and is there a guide, or just a bunch of channels?
Yeah, so the TVs for the most part have the guides embedded in them.
Okay.
So the TV I have here, I plugged it into the antenna. What'll happen is then it will automatically scan for channels. So the same way, like if you think about your car radio and the scan feature, your TV does exactly the same thing by default. And in America, you can't ship a TV that doesn't have a TV tuner. So TVs all have tuners, but they require external antennas. So you have to plug an antenna in. So you plug the antenna in and it scans for channels, and then it builds a program guide. Generally, There are some over-the-air DVRs, but they're all third-party kind of things. I haven't seen a connected TV with a built-in record function. But the rest of it is built in. The tuner's built in, the program guide's built in. All of that information gets pulled, particularly if a connected TV gets pulled through an internet. I think it gets pulled through an internet connection. I actually don't know, but it builds the guide based on what channels it scans. And one of the challenges in the over-the-air space is the channels move. And so we do tell our audience fairly frequently to rescan, because you might find new channels, you might find some channels have moved. And so people that are regular users of antenna-based TV know to rescan their TVs. But like here in Los Angeles, KTLA is channel 5.
Okay.
And so that used to be channel 5. Now it's technically channel 5.1. And there's a channel 5.2, and there's a channel 5.3, and there's a channel 5.4. So channel 5 is now actually 4 channels.
And those are all antenna based, or they could also be what comes with the connected box, which is another model, right?
So streaming is a different model than broadcast.
Right.
And the way that you license content, generally, the studios would have a different structure for streaming versus broadcast, unless you're packaging them together. So for our networks, not all over-the-air networks stream, but ours do. So TBD, Comet, Charge, Stadium, which are our 4 over-the-air national channels, they all also stream, which we think is a kind of the right approach. Like my view of this is it's all broadcasting. Like broadcasting at the end of the day is the art of putting a piece of content out, getting the broadest audience possible, and then selling advertising against that audience. And a free streaming channel, a fast channel, does that. A free over-the-air channel does that. And so, from my perspective, they're sort of the same thing, but technologically they are different. One is purely coming through the internet, and the other is literally coming through the air.
Got it. And so I understand from your perspective, you're hitting all the notes because that's the way that you can incrementally build an audience, right? I mean, that way you get audience if you're streaming, if you're getting it over the air, if you're getting it through your cable box, if you're getting it through a streaming box or the connected TV streaming services. So all these things. So is everyone just out there shopping for content to put on all of their different services and creating content? I mean, it seems to me an explosion of choices.
Which leads back to the discovery issue I was mentioning earlier. There's a lot of content out there right now. There's a lot of
and on all these different ways to receive the content.
And ways to license the content and platforms to create content for, and on and on and on. It's a problem that keeps sort of multiplying on itself. The more platforms you have, the more channels you have, the more programming brands you have, the more acute that discovery problem gets, which is ironic. I look at it a little bit differently. Our kind of mantra as a company is connecting people to content everywhere. And so what that implies is it's not up to me how you want to watch content. It's up to you. If you want to watch it on your phone, great. You want to watch it on a connected TV? Awesome. You want to watch it on a laptop? Cool. You want to watch it connected via an antenna? Awesome. And then it's my job as a programmer to make sure that my product is available to you when and where you want to consume it. It shouldn't be the consumer's challenge to figure out what they need to buy to experience my content. As a practical matter, there's very little content that is so compelling it gets people to buy a new device, to change a platform, to improve the speed of their internet connection. Whatever it takes to get that content, most people aren't willing to go that extra mile for any particular piece of content. There's some content that is so unique and so valuable it gets people to change devices. But once you get outside of sports, which is the best repository of that kind of content ever, right? And if you're a fan of the New York Yankees and you want to watch the New York Yankees, there's only the New York Yankees. I mean,
Right.
I believe there is a team called the Yokohama Yankees, but it's not the same thing.
And you're going to find your way to get that content, whether you're paying for that sports service on whatever solution you have, but you're going to figure out how to get it because you're a fan.
Yeah, if you're a fan of that, you're going to figure out how to get it. And if you have to pay for it, then you have a decision to make, right? It's either worth it to you or it's not worth it to you. And again, then it's our job to get it to you when and where you want to have it. And that's why you'll hear us talking as a company a lot about direct to consumer for the sports business. And that's an important thing going forward. If you're a fan of a team and you're not a cable subscriber, you should be able to still buy access to that season or whatever. And we see that more and more, that people want to be connected to their content in their own ways. And we need to preserve value for our partners in some cases, but overall, we want to make sure that the content is where the consumers want it to be, so that they have an opportunity to see the thing they want to see.
Now, what about, we also have mobile, we also have the web, and we also have AVOD and SVOD, which is more on the cable side of things. So are you also looking at placements of content and all those other sort of models as well?
We work a lot in the AVOD space. So on Stirr, so at the local station level, we have streaming rights to most, if not all, of the syndicated content we put on there. And so on a market by market basis. So part of what we've done with Stirr, which really from a technical standpoint was not trivial at all, was set up a geofencing system so that the right shows are geofenced to the right markets. And so if it's a market where we have Ellen, you can see the last 5 episodes of Ellen if you're in that market. Okay. Or for the market where we have Jeopardy or Maury Povich or whatever your favorite show is. And that local station is the only one that's able to present the ability to, on demand, catch up with that show. And that's proven to be really, really popular. We thought it would be. These are popular shows and they're well-known shows and they're well-established shows. And there isn't a lot of places where they're available on demand. So that was a big initiative for us last year, I think. So we are in the AVOD business from the perspective of a platform, of a distribution platform. I don't know really that we do much in the SVOD business, in the subscription video on demand business. Tennis Channel has a really cool subscription product called Tennis Channel Plus. If you're, and you don't have to be a Tennis Channel subscriber necessarily to buy it, but it gives you kind of an all access pass. So like for the French Open, you can watch all of the courts and pick the match that you want to see at any given time. So we do have some stuff that is in the subscription business. I think we'll have more subscription businesses in the future. But today we're mostly in, most of the businesses I'm involved in, I tend to be on the ad-supported side.
And the thing that I keep hearing from you too is these like vertical content areas. So you mentioned sports, you mentioned tennis. Do you see also other models growing? The finance channel, or like back in the early days of cable, or that kind of famous Saturday Night Live episode where the mall had just the masking tape store. These like really specific verticals of content, channels all over the place, like it was with cable, but now it seems to be being born again in this world.
Well, it is sort of a what's old is new again kind of thing. When we started working on Stirr, we started, the phrase that we used was the basic food groups of content.
Oh, okay. I like that. Yeah.
And if you look at basic cable, the original basic cable, the early 80s basic cable, it covered the basic food groups, right? There was a news channel, there was a sports channel, there was a youth channel, there was a lifestyle channel, There was a general entertainment channel or two. There was a factual channel, right? Basic food groups.
Right.
And so when we looked at how we were going to program Stirr for the over-the-air audience, I mean, it's an OTT service, but it's promoted a lot to an over-the-air audience. That was the first thing. Okay, let's make sure we have those basic food groups covered. And as we've been building our own channel portfolio, our network portfolio, it's a similar kind of thing, right? So Comet is a science fiction channel. Charge is an action show channel. TBD is a youth-oriented channel. Stadium is a sports channel. And you can see these patterns, and they do repeat themselves, because there was a version of the basic food groups of cable in the 80s, and then in the 90s, when you went from analog cable to digital cable, then there was the digital tiers with whatever sort of expanded basic food groups. Right now, these were the luxury food groups, not the basic ones.
Right. Even now, Spectrum is still sort of organizing it like that, and it's very confusing, I think. But so you'll start to see, and then the other announcements that came out of the New Fronts a couple of weeks ago, what was the sort of talk of augmented reality and shoppability. So are you guys looking at shoppability for all your different channels and things like that? You know, the ability to really bring that Jennifer Aniston t-shirt metaphor, that T-commerce thing to make happen. Is that something that is of interest right now that maybe your Skunkworks is looking at, or you're already playing with models?
I can't imagine there's a business model in the media business I either haven't or won't play with.
That's why it's fun to talk to you, because you've got your fingers in everything right now.
Well, listen, the labs team is a great. I mean, for me personally, it's a great outlet to work with really creative people on projects that aren't necessarily tied to an operating business, and that are really just about, you know, figuring out how we can skate to where the puck is going.
Right.
It's just been a lot of fun. In terms of commerce, there are a couple different ways to think about commerce. We do have a couple of shopping channels on Stirr. We're talking to others. So my guess is we'll have more of that activity on the OTT side. To learn really as much as anything else. I mean, some of those are big established businesses that have legacy and history, and they really do know what they're doing. And there are others that we're talking to that are taking a newer, fresher approach to how you combine content and commerce. There's a food company that I think is doing some really interesting work. And a few others. So the short answer, yes, we're playing with those kinds of models. But I think it's also, you know, how are you using your airtime? What are you using your airtime to sell? So, you know, the notion that, you know, maybe there's products that we have to sell, and we use some of the airtime to sell those products. Maybe we partner with people and have a deeper relationship than just you're an advertiser. You know, I don't work a lot on our sports side, but, you know, look what the sports division did with Bally. You know, all the networks are branded as Bally. That's about as deep of a partnership as you can get. Is
right. Smack dab, you know, right.
Putting the partner's name on the door.
Right.
So I think that there's a lot of room to experiment in this. I also think that just as everything else evolves, advertising models have to evolve as well. You know, as I'm sure you know, before I came to this company, I was doing a lot of work in branded content and, you know, producing movies for Marriott, and, you know, we did spots for Fiat, and we also worked for companies that didn't rhyme, but but those happen to be two of my favorites. But you know, that notion of sort of a brand being part of the content and part of the storytelling, I believed in for a long time, and we certainly haven't seen the end of it. And the 30-second spot model has been a very good one for our company and continues to be. But it's, you have to continue the course and the pace of innovation. You can't sort of sit back and say, okay, well, that's worked for 20 years, so it'll work for the next 20 years. The one constant is change. We all know that. And in this, and when it comes to, the basic mechanisms by which we make money, we're constantly examining those to make sure that in a dynamic industry, we're up to speed.
Mm. If you looked at your crystal ball, we have another like 10 minutes. I just want to talk about the future a little bit. And I know we mentioned discoverability, but do you think there'll be a point where literally you could go up to your TV and just say, female comedy, rom-com, meet cute, or whatever your words are, and it will bring up whatever Sinclair has on all your various things, and it'll give me a choice? Are we going to ever get there where you're going across all the different models and services and it will pluck out of it, what I want to watch, or serve up to me something that it thinks I want to watch based on data?
Well, it's the same sort of answer. Like if I had the answer to the discovery problem,
you would be a rich man.
I'd be implementing it right now.
Yeah.
Look, I think things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, I think we have reasonably good hopes that those will help us solve this discovery problem. I mean, look, for me, I'd prefer if the TV didn't need me to ask it a question. If the TV understood my viewing habits and viewing patterns to the point where when I turn it on,
exactly
it
how
says,
I felt about my ex-husband. Let me just tell you. Right, but you would prefer if it just knew.
Yeah, at a certain level, like, if the machine is able to track your consumption, it should be able at some point to predict your consumption. And it's sort of a not too far-fetched thought. If you look at some of the services now, one of the virtual MVPDs that I subscribe to actually does a pretty good job of figuring out what I want to watch based on my viewing patterns. It knows that, when I first turn on the TV in the morning, I tune it to a specific news channel. It knows that in the afternoon, I tend to go to something else. And so it all orders the choices it offers me based on what I've consumed. And I think that's an interesting path, because I do get concerned when I hear people talking about personalization and customization and whatnot, because a lot of times that leads to a consumer experience that's a lot of work for the consumer. And it needs to be less work for the consumer, right? The more work you make it for the consumer, the less often they will do it. It's just a general rule. And the beauty of ad-supported is, it adheres to one of the key rules of things you never have to do research on. People will always like free.
Right.
I don't feel like I need to research that. But at the same time, you need to connect them to the right thing, right? And my hope is that as the machines get smarter, the path between consumers and the thing they want to consume gets shorter. And that's kind of the high level way I like to view it. Now, how much of that will come true, I don't know. I don't really actually have a crystal ball. Although if I had a time machine, that'd be pretty cool. Go back to 1998 and buy a lot of Apple stock. And
right. Where can we, Scott, learn about all the things that you're doing? Is there anywhere that folks can dial in so they can learn more?
Well, certainly all the stuff that we're doing at Sinclair, we talk about on our website, which is sbgi.net. But I think, Stirr, which has 2 R's, second R for flavor, it's a fun fact. They presented the brand Stirr when we were looking at brand choice, and I was like, and then the branding team came back and added a second R to it. I'm like, now it's really cool.
Right. It works
Who thought misspelling it was the way to go?
I know. It is more sexy in a way with that second R.
It kind of is. There's actually the just inside baseball, but the development name for that logo is the Naughty R's. The R's can do things. The R's can do things. We'll just leave it at that. But so Stirr.com is where you can access. So you can access Stirr on the web. You can also access it in obviously primarily meant as an app. So iOS, Android, Roku, Fire. We just launched on the Samsung platform last week, or week before last, sorry. So it's now available on there. NewsON is on all those platforms as well, except Samsung. That might happen soon though. And where else? And then, the stations, if you live in one of our markets, all the stations have their own apps and websites as well. So I think at the moment we maintain some ridiculous number, like a couple hundred apps.
Yeah, I love though the thinking around a lot of this is how a consumer consumes, which is that direct to consumer piece that you were talking about. It's just so smart. Well, Scott Ehrlich, who is the senior vice president of growth networks and content at Sinclair Broadcast Group, thank you so much for enlightening us. I love talking to you because honestly, it is a confusing marketplace right now. And I think content creators need to understand what's going out to consumers and how to plug in. And then consumers need to understand what their options are. And the advertising and brands in the middle need to get like where their content is going. So it's very helpful to hear, from the front seat, what's happening out there. So thank you so much.
Anytime.
All right, we're going to be coming back hopefully in another week with another great episode. Probably not as good as this one because Scott is so smart and interesting. But we will be back again. Thanks everybody for listening, and thank you again, Scott.
Pleasure.